The chandelier above the mahogany dining table cast a warm, deceptive glow over the assembled family members. I sat at the far end, as I always did, pushing roasted vegetables around my plate while my older brother Marcus regaled everyone with tales of his latest promotion at the investment firm. My mother beamed with pride, her hand resting on his arm as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. My sister Victoria chimed in occasionally, dropping casual mentions of her upcoming gallery opening in Manhattan. Even my younger cousin had brought news of his acceptance to medical school. And then there was me, 28 years old, wearing a slightly wrinkled button-down shirt that had seen better days, nursing a glass of water, while everyone else enjoyed the expensive wine Marcus had brought. I'd declined the wine not because I didn't want it, but because I couldn't afford to bring a bottle of equal caliber, and the asymmetry felt like another small defeat. So, Alex, my father's voice cut through the ambient conversation like a knife through butter. The table fell silent. I looked up to find his steel-gray eyes fixed on me with that familiar mixture of disappointment and barely concealed frustration. When are you going to tell us about your endeavors? Still chasing that military fantasy of yours? The word fantasy hit me like a physical blow. I'd learned long ago that correcting my father was pointless. He decided years ago that my decision to enlist instead of following him into the family law practice was a personal affront, a rejection of everything he'd built. Never mind that I'd tried to explain my reasons 100 times. Never mind that I'd found something that gave my life meaning in a way that corporate law never could. I'm still serving, Dad, I said quietly, keeping my voice even. I'm stationed at. Serving, he interrupted with a dismissive wave of his hand. You're wasting your potential playing soldier. Meanwhile, your brother is making partner at 32. Victoria's art is being featured in prestigious galleries, and you're taking orders from people who probably couldn't get into community college. I felt my jaw tighten. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but said nothing. She never did. Marcus at least had the decency to look down at his plate, though Victoria seemed to be enjoying the spectacle, a slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Dad, that's not fair. I started, but he wasn't finished. Fair? You want to talk about fair? He leaned back in his chair, warming to his subject now. His courtroom voice emerging, the one that had intimidated countless witnesses and opposing counsel over the years. I gave you every advantage. The best schools, connections at top firms, a guaranteed position at Henderson and Associates. And what did you do? You threw it all away to play dress-up in a uniform and take orders. You're nearly 30 years old, Alex, and what do you have to show for it? No career trajectory, no property, no prospects. You're useless to this family. The word useless hung in the air like poison. I heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath, not from shock at his cruelty, but from delight at the drama. Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. My mother reached for her wine glass with a trembling hand. I should have been angry. Part of me was. But mostly I just felt tired. Tired of trying to prove myself to a man who had decided my worth before I'd even made my choice. Tired of being the family disappointment, the black sheep, the cautionary tale they'd whisper about at future gatherings. Remember when Alex had such potential? Such a waste. I have orders to report next week, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I won't be able to make it to Thanksgiving this year. My father snorted. Well, at least we'll be spared this awkwardness for one holiday. Maybe by Christmas, you'll have come to your senses and will be ready to join the real world. I still have connections. It's not too late to salvage something from this mess you've made of your life. I excused myself shortly after, claiming an early morning commitment. No one protested. As I gathered my jacket from the foyer, I could hear the conversation resume behind me, the volume and laughter returning as if my departure had lifted a weight from the room. Perhaps it had. Perhaps my presence was the weight. Driving home to my modest apartment, I replayed the dinner in my mind, each harsh word echoing louder than the last. Useless. The word felt like a brand burned into my consciousness. I thought about the medals in the locked drawer of my desk, the commendations I'd never mentioned, the classified missions I could never discuss. I thought about the teammates who trusted me with their lives, about the lives we'd saved, about the sacrifices we'd made in places whose names would never appear in newspapers. But none of that mattered here, in this world of quarterly earnings and gallery openings and medical school acceptances. Here, I was just the disappointment, the one who'd chosen wrong, the useless son who couldn't meet his father's expectations. I made a decision that night, sitting in my darkened apartment with a cup of cold coffee and a heart full of resolve. I wouldn't go back. Not next year, not the year after. I'd free them from the burden of my presence, spare them the discomfort of acknowledging the family member who'd taken the wrong path. It would be 6 years before I saw them again, and when I did, everything would be different. The next 6 years rewrote everything I thought I knew about my own limits. The deployment that took me away from that disastrous family dinner was just the beginning, a prologue to a story that would push me further than I'd ever imagined possible. We deployed to a region I still can't name, tasked with operations I can only partially discuss. What I can say is that the first 3 months stripped away every piece of the person I'd been at that dinner table. The Alex who'd sat silently absorbing his father's disappointment seemed like a different person, softer, uncertain, still seeking approval from people who would never give it. Combat has a way of clarifying things. When you're responsible for the lives of the people beside you, when split-second decisions mean the difference between everyone going home or folding flags for widows, the opinions of civilians, even your own family, begin to matter less. Not because you stop caring, but because you realize that the metrics by which they judge success are incompatible with the reality you inhabit. Lieutenant Chen, my commanding officer during that first deployment, pulled me aside 3 months in. We were in a forward operating base, exhausted after a 36-hour operation that had gone sideways in every possible way. We'd completed the mission, extracted everyone alive, but it had cost us. I was sitting in the dusty compound, staring at nothing, when she sat down beside me. "You're good at this, Martinez," she said without preamble. Chen wasn't one for sugarcoating. Better than good. You've got instincts most people never develop, even with years of experience. But you're holding something back. It's like you don't believe you deserve to be here. I didn't respond immediately. How could I explain that I'd spent my entire life being told I'd made the wrong choice? That even now, even after everything we'd accomplished, part of me still heard my father's voice calling me useless? "Someone told you that you weren't good enough," Chin continued, reading my silence accurately. "Someone whose opinion you valued, and you've been carrying that with you. I see it in the way you volunteer for the most dangerous positions, like you're trying to prove something. I see it in how you downplay your own contributions during debriefs." She stood, dust falling from her uniform. "Whatever you're trying to prove, and whoever you're trying to prove it to, stop. The only person who needs to believe in your worth is you. These people here." She gestured to the compound where our team was resting, recovering, preparing for the next mission. "They already know what you're worth. They trust you with their lives. That's the only validation that matters." Those words stayed with me, though it would take time for me to truly internalize them. The deployment continued, each mission adding layers of experience, confidence, and capability. I stopped volunteering for tasks out of a need to prove myself and started selecting them strategically, recognizing where my specific skills could make the difference. By the end of that first deployment, I'd been recommended for Special Forces selection. The recommendation came from Chun, endorsed by our entire chain of command. Martinez shows exceptional tactical awareness, leadership under pressure, and the kind of adaptability we need in unconventional warfare. He's wasted in a conventional unit. The Special Forces selection process is designed to break you. The attrition rate speaks for itself. More than half of candidates don't make it through. The physical requirements are brutal, but the psychological demands are worse. They need to know that when everything falls apart, when you're exhausted and hurt and scared, you'll still function. More than function, excel. I thought I was prepared. I wasn't. Nobody is. But I also discovered something during those months of relentless testing. I was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined. When instructors screamed that I wasn't good enough, that I should quit, that I'd never make it, I didn't hear my father's voice anymore. I heard Chen's voice. The only person who needs to believe in your worth is you. I graduated in the top 10% of my class. The green beret felt like more than just a symbol when they placed it on my head. It felt like proof, tangible and undeniable, that I was exactly where I belonged. The years that followed blurred together in a mosaic of deployments, training cycles, and missions that pushed the boundaries of what I thought possible. I learned languages, Arabic, Pashto, and later Mandarin. I trained indigenous forces, building relationships with people who had every reason to distrust Americans but chose to fight alongside us anyway. I led teams into situations where failure meant death, and success meant saving lives that would never know how close they'd come to disaster. There were medals, though I didn't keep count. A Bronze Star for actions during a mission where our team held a position against overwhelming odds to allow civilians to evacuate. An Army Commendation Medal for training initiatives that improved the survival rates of Allied forces. A Purple Heart I didn't like thinking about, earned during an operation that went wrong but could have gone much worse. Each medal came with memories, some proud, some painful, all significant. I was promoted to Staff Sergeant, then Sergeant First Class. With each promotion came more responsibility, larger teams, more complex missions. I found myself becoming the kind of leader I'd always respected, someone who led from the front, who never asked his team to do anything he wouldn't do himself, who valued their lives and welfare above his own career advancement. Between deployments, I pursued education, not because anyone expected it, but because I wanted it. I completed my bachelor's degree through online courses and weekend classes, then started on a master's in international relations. The kid who'd been called useless for not wanting to be a lawyer had become fluent in 3 languages and was writing papers on counterinsurgency doctrine that were being read by people making strategic decisions. I made friends in the military who became closer than family. People like Rodriguez, my team sergeant, who'd saved my life twice and whose daughter called me Uncle Alex. People like Thompson, our communication specialist, who could crack a joke in any language and made the worst situations bearable. People like Davis, our medic, who could stabilize a sucking chest wound while under fire and still had the gentleness to comfort a terrified child. These people knew my worth because they saw it demonstrated every day. They didn't care that I'd disappointed my father or that I didn't have a law degree. They cared that I was competent, reliable, and would move heaven and earth to bring them home safely. During those 6 years, I occasionally thought about reaching out to my family. I'd pick up my phone, pull up my mother's contact, and hover my thumb over the call button. But what would I say? That I was doing well? That I'd found purpose and meaning and success on my own terms? They'd made it clear that those things only counted if they fit their definition of achievement. So I stayed away, and they didn't reach out either. My mother sent birthday cards, always a week late, as if she'd forgotten and felt guilty. Marcus sent LinkedIn connection requests I ignored. Victoria never made any contact at all. And my father? Silence. Maybe he'd written me off entirely. Maybe he told people at his country club that he had 2 children, conveniently forgetting the third. It hurt less than I expected. Or maybe I just got better at not thinking about it. When you're planning operations in hostile territory or teaching villagers how to defend themselves against insurgents, you don't have much mental bandwidth left for family drama. But then, in year 5, something changed. We were conducting operations in Central Africa, training local forces, and conducting direct action missions against terrorist networks. It was the kind of operation that required linguistic skills, cultural awareness, tactical expertise, and the ability to build trust with people who had every reason to be suspicious of foreign soldiers. Our team spent 4 months embedded with a local militia, living in their compound, eating their food, learning their concerns. We trained them in small unit tactics, medical care, and intelligence gathering. More importantly, we listened. We learned about their families, their hopes, their fears. We became, in our own way, part of their community. When an attack came, a coordinated assault by a terrorist group with superior numbers and firepower, our team and our trainees fought together. It was chaos, the kind of fight where training and instinct blur together, where every decision happens faster than conscious thought. I found myself coordinating a defense while simultaneously calling in air support and directing our medic to multiple casualty sites. We held. The enemy withdrew. When the dust settled, we'd taken casualties, both American and local, but we'd prevented a massacre. The local commander, a man named Azizi who'd initially been skeptical of our presence, embraced me after the battle. "You fought like one of us," he said in heavily accented English. "You bled with us. You are brother." That operation earned me a Silver Star, one of the highest decorations for valor. The citation would eventually read, "For gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States." Staff Sergeant Martinez's exceptional courage, tactical proficiency, and selfless leadership directly resulted in the successful defense of Allied forces and the prevention of mass civilian casualties. Standing in a dusty compound in Africa, my uniform torn and bloodstained, accepting that medal from a commanding general who'd flown in specifically for the ceremony, I finally understood something fundamental. My father's opinion didn't define me. His assessment of my worth was based on criteria that had nothing to do with the person I'd become. I was not useless. I was exactly what my team, my mission, and the people I served needed me to be. By year 6, I'd been selected for Sergeant Major Academy, a career school that prepares senior enlisted leaders for strategic positions. It was an honor typically reserved for soldiers identified as future command sergeants major, the highest enlisted rank. My file included recommendations from everyone from my company commander to a 2-star general I'd briefed on regional security issues. I was 34 years old. I'd seen and done things that would sound like fiction if I described them at a dinner party. I'd led teams, saved lives, trained armies, and earned the respect of people whose opinions actually mattered to me. I'd built a career that was meaningful, challenging, and important. And I hadn't spoken to my father in 6 years. Chapter 3: The Summons. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday in March, forwarded to me through military channels because my family had no idea where I was stationed. It was a heavy cream-colored envelope with embossed lettering, the kind of stationery my mother had always favored for important occasions. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the 70th birthday of Richard Henderson Martinez," it read, followed by details about a formal dinner at the family estate. At the bottom, in my mother's handwriting, "Please come, Alex. It's been too long. We miss you." I stared at that last line for a long time. We miss you. Not I miss you, but we. As if speaking for the whole family, though I doubted everyone shared that sentiment. I wondered if my father even knew she'd added that note, or if he'd approved the invitation at all. Rodriguez found me in my office, still holding the invitation. "You look like someone just told you your leave got canceled," he observed, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "What's up?" I handed him the invitation without comment. He read it, eyebrows rising. "Family reunion? Didn't know you had family, Sarge. You never talk about them." "There's a reason for that," I said, taking the invitation back. "We don't exactly see eye to eye." "Nobody sees eye to eye with their family," Rodriguez countered. "I love my parents, but every visit home, my mom asks when I'm going to get a real job and stop playing soldier. Like, 20 years in service is a phase I'm going through." I smiled despite myself. "What do you tell her?" "I tell her that my playing soldier paid for her new roof and my sister's college tuition." He shrugged. "But mostly I let it go. She worries, you know? It's how she shows love, even if it comes out wrong." "This is different," I said, though I wasn't sure I could explain how. The weight of my father's disappointment wasn't the same as a mother's worry. It was assessment and judgment, a verdict rendered years ago that I'd never been able to appeal. "So don't go," Rodriguez said simply. "You've got nothing to prove to anyone." But that was the thing. I did have something to prove, or at least part of me still felt like I did. 6 years of silence, 6 years of building a life and career my father knew nothing about, and now this. A summons disguised as an invitation. A chance to show them, what? That I'd been right? That they'd been wrong? That I'd succeeded by my own metrics, even if I'd failed by theirs? "When is it?" Rodriguez asked. 6 weeks. "I'd need to request leave." "You've got 30 days banked and we're between deployments. Colonel would approve it." Rodriguez studied me carefully. "Question is, do you want to go?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought about that dinner 6 years ago, about the word useless and how it had echoed in my mind during some of the darkest moments of deployment. I thought about Chin telling me the only person whose opinion mattered was my own, about the medals in my desk drawer, about the team that trusted me with their lives. I don't know, I admitted finally. Part of me wants to walk away, keep the distance I've built. But another part. I trailed off, not sure how to articulate the feeling. I spent so many years trying to earn their approval, trying to make them understand. Maybe I need to close that chapter properly, you know? Not to prove anything, but just to be done with it. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Can I give you some advice? Go, but don't go for them. Don't go to change their minds or make them proud or show them they were wrong. Go for you. To look your old man in the eye and know, in your bones, that his opinion doesn't define you anymore. He stood, heading for the door. And wear your dress uniform. Show them exactly who you became. The suggestion to wear my dress uniform was both appealing and complicated. Soldiers generally wore dress uniforms only for formal military functions, ceremonies, memorials, official events. Wearing one to a civilian family gathering could be seen as showboating or insecure, a visual declaration of, look what I accomplished. But then again, this was who I was. The uniform wasn't a costume I wore to impress people, it was the representation of half my life, of sacrifices and achievements, and a path chosen deliberately despite fierce opposition. Maybe it was time my family saw that. I submitted my leave request that afternoon. It was approved within 24 hours. Then I did something I hadn't done in 6 years. I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. Hello. Mom, it's Alex. There was a long pause, followed by a sharp intake of breath. Alex? Oh my God. Alex, is that really you?
Yeah, Mom.
It's me. I got the invitation. You did? Oh, thank God. I wasn't sure the address we had would still work. I asked Marcus to try to find you on social media, but he said you weren't on any of the platforms. I thought maybe... She paused. I thought maybe you decided you were done with us. The hurt in her voice was genuine, and I felt a pang of guilt. Whatever my issues with my father, my mother had never been cruel. She'd been complicit in her silence, yes, but not cruel. I'm not done, I said quietly. I've just been busy. Deployed mostly. Deployed, she repeated, and I could hear the worry underlying the word. You've been in danger? All this time? It's what I signed up for, Mom. Another pause. Will you come? To your father's birthday? I know things didn't end well last time, but it's been 6 years. Maybe things can be different now. I'm coming, I confirmed. I wanted to let you know so you could add me to the count. Oh, Alex, that's wonderful. Everyone will be so happy to see you. Marcus just made junior partner, and Victoria's been commissioned for peace by the Museum of Modern Art. We have so much to catch up on. I noticed she didn't mention what I'd been doing, didn't ask about my life or career. It was always about Marcus and Victoria, their achievements fitting neatly into categories my parents understood and valued. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone, I said, keeping my voice neutral. We talked for a few more minutes, surface-level conversation about travel arrangements and dietary restrictions. She didn't ask about medals or promotions or deployments. I didn't volunteer the information. When we hung up, I felt the same hollow ache I'd felt 6 years ago, leaving that dinner early. Nothing had changed, except that I'd learned not to expect anything different. The weeks leading up to the birthday dinner were busy with final preparations for the next training cycle and catching up on administrative work. I found myself thinking about the upcoming reunion at odd moments, during morning runs, in the middle of briefings, late at night, when sleep wouldn't come. Thompson noticed my distraction during a training exercise. You good, Sarge? You seem somewhere else. Family thing coming up, I said, adjusting the scope on my rifle. Nothing serious. Family things are always serious, Thompson countered. Otherwise, they wouldn't get in your head like this. You want to talk about it? I found myself explaining the situation, the years of disappointment, the dinner where I'd been called useless, the 6 years of silence that followed. Thompson listened without interrupting, his usual jovial demeanor giving way to thoughtful attention. "So, you're going back to prove you're not useless?" he asked when I finished. "No," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I already know I'm not useless. I guess I'm going back to say goodbye properly, if that makes sense. To close the door on who I used to be and make peace with the fact that they might never understand who I became." Thompson nodded approvingly. "That's mature as hell, Sarge. Just remember, you don't need their permission to be proud of yourself. You've earned every bit of respect you've got from people whose respect actually means something." The night before I left, I opened the locked drawer in my desk and looked at the medals I'd never displayed. Bronze Star with Valor Device, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Army Commendation Medals, Overseas Service Ribbons, Combat Infantry Badge, Special Forces Tab, Master Parachutist Badge. The physical representations of a career I'd built from nothing, despite every discouragement. I selected my dress uniform from the closet, Army service uniform in deep blue, with the medals properly mounted on the left breast, badges and tabs in their correct positions, rank insignia polished to a mirror shine. The uniform had been tailored perfectly after my last promotion ceremony. When I tried it on, it fit like a second skin, familiar and right. Looking in the mirror, I saw a man my father wouldn't recognize. Not the uncertain 22-year-old who'd enlisted despite family opposition, or the defeated 28-year-old who'd sat silently absorbing criticism. This man was confident, capable, decorated for valor, and respected by people who mattered. This man had nothing to prove. Rodriguez caught me in the hallway, carrying my dress uniform in a garment bag. "So you're doing it? Wearing the uniform?" "I am," I confirmed. "Not to show off. Just this is who I am. They should see it." "Damn right they should." Rodriguez clapped me on the shoulder. "Knock 'em dead, Sarge. And remember, you've got nothing to apologize for." The flight home felt surreal, like traveling backward through time. As the plane descended into familiar airspace, I watched the landscape I'd grown up in materialize below, the sprawling suburbs, the downtown skyline, the network of highways I'd learned to navigate as a teenager. It looked smaller somehow, less significant than it had in memory. I'd arranged to stay at a hotel rather than with family. That small act of independence felt important, a statement that I was visiting, not returning. I checked in, hung up my dress uniform to let any wrinkles fall out, and tried not to think about the next evening. That night, alone in the hotel room, I called Chun. She'd retired 2 years prior and was teaching at a military university, but we'd stayed in touch. She answered immediately. "Martinez? It's late. You okay?" "I'm good, ma'am. Just wanted to touch base before tomorrow." "The family thing. I remember you mentioning it." I could hear her settling into a chair, giving me her full attention. "How are you feeling?" "Honestly, I don't know. I keep telling myself it doesn't matter, that I'm past needing their approval. But part of me still..." I trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Part of you still wants them to see what you've become," Chin finished. "That's not weakness, Alex. That's human. We all want the people who shaped us to acknowledge our growth. But here's what you need to remember. Whether they see it or not doesn't change the reality of what you've accomplished. You've saved lives. You've led with distinction. You've earned recognition from people who understand the significance of what you do. That's not diminished by one civilian's ignorance." "I know that intellectually," I said. "But knowing it and feeling it are different things." "Then feel this," Chin said firmly. "I'm proud of you. Rodriguez is proud of you. Your entire team is proud of you. Hell, that general who pinned the Silver Star on you told me personally that you were one of the finest young leaders he'd encountered in 30 years of service. You have earned respect, admiration, and recognition from people who've seen you at your worst and your best. That's real, Alex. Everything else is noise." After we hung up, I felt steadier. Chin was right. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever my father said or didn't say, it couldn't take away what I'd built. I'd gone from being called useless to being a decorated Special Forces sergeant trusted with some of the military's most challenging missions. That transformation was mine, earned through sweat and blood and determination.
No one could take it from me.
I slept better than expected that night, and when I woke the next morning, I felt a strange calm. Today wasn't about redemption or validation. It was simply about showing up as myself, fully, honestly, and without apology. The dress uniform went on with practiced ease. I adjusted the medals, checked that every element was in its proper place, and studied my reflection. The man looking back at me was someone I was proud to be. It was time to go home. The family estate looked exactly as I remembered. Imposing gates, manicured lawns stretching toward a colonial-style house that spoke of old money and older expectations. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive vehicles that probably cost more than I'd earned in a year. I parked my rental at the end of the row, its modest presence a stark contrast to the Mercedes and BMWs surrounding it. For a moment, I sat in the car, engine off, watching people enter the house. I recognized some of them, aunts, uncles, family friends who'd known me as a child. They were dressed in cocktail attire, the men in suits, the women in elegant dresses. I looked down at my dress uniform, the deep blue standing out against the leather seat, and felt a flicker of doubt. Was this a mistake? Would wearing the uniform seem confrontational, like I was trying too hard to make a point? Would it embarrass my mother, who'd always valued fitting in above all else? Then I remembered Thompson's words, "You don't need their permission to be proud of yourself." And Rodriguez, "Show them exactly who you became." This wasn't about confrontation. It was about honesty. This uniform, these medals, this path, it was my truth. I got out of the car. The walk to the front door felt longer than it should have. Spring evening air carried the scent of jasmine from my mother's garden, a smell that brought back memories of childhood summers and a time when things had seemed simpler. Through the large windows, I could see the party in full swing, people mingling with champagne glasses, a string quartet playing in the corner, tables laden with expensive catering. I rang the doorbell. My mother answered, and her hand flew to her mouth. For a moment, we just stared at each other. She looked older, lines around her eyes I didn't remember, gray threading through her carefully styled hair. But her eyes were the same, and they filled with tears as she took in my appearance. "Alex," she breathed. "Oh my God, Alex, you're in uniform." "I'm a soldier, Mom," I said gently. "This is who I am." She stepped forward and hugged me tightly, and I felt her shoulders shake with silent sobs. When she pulled back, she was smiling despite the tears. "You look so handsome. So official. I've missed you so much." "I've missed you too, Mom." She wiped her eyes, careful not to smudge her makeup. Come in, come in. Everyone's here already. Your father is in the study, greeting guests as they arrive. I should warn you, he doesn't know you're coming. I thought it would be better as a surprise." That explained a lot. My father didn't know I was here, hadn't approved my attendance, hadn't had time to prepare his reactions or criticisms. This was going to be unfiltered, immediate, and probably uncomfortable. "The party's in the main salon," my mother continued, leading me through the familiar foyer. "But maybe you want a moment to compose yourself first? The study is quiet if you need." "I'm good, Mom," I said, cutting off her nervous rambling. "Let's just do this." She squeezed my hand and led me toward the main salon. As we approached, I could hear the buzz of conversation, laughter, the clink of glasses. Then my mother stepped through the doorway, and I followed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The closest conversations stopped mid-sentence as people turned to look at me. Then the silence spread like ripples on water, each person nudging their neighbor, pointing, staring at the soldier in dress uniform standing in the doorway of the formal salon. I swept my eyes across the room, taking in the familiar and not-so-familiar faces. My brother Marcus stood near the bar, his mouth literally hanging open. Victoria was frozen mid-laugh, her champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips. Cousins I hadn't seen in years were whispering to each other. Aunts and uncles were looking between me and each other, trying to figure out how to react. And then people started to stand. It began with Colonel Henderson, my father's law partner and a veteran himself, Army, Vietnam era. He recognized the uniform, the medals, what they represented. He stood from his seat near the window, his expression one of respect and recognition. Then Marcus's wife Sarah stood, pulling Marcus up with her. She'd always been kind to me, one of the few family members who'd never made me feel like a failure. Others followed, my uncle Robert, who'd served in the Navy. My cousin Jennifer. Family friends I barely remembered. One by one, they rose from their seats, the standing ovation spreading through the room like wildfire. My father appeared in the doorway from the study, drawn by the unusual silence, followed by the commotion. He stopped dead when he saw me, his face cycling through expressions I couldn't quite read: shock, certainly, and maybe anger at not being warned. His eyes swept over my uniform, lingering on the medals, the rank insignia, the badges that told the story of a career he dismissed as useless. Colonel Henderson moved first, crossing the room with his hand extended. "Sergeant First Class Martinez," he said formally, shaking my hand. "It's an honor. I didn't know Dick's son was Special Forces." "He didn't mention it?" I said mildly, glancing at my father. "He said you were in the military," Henderson said carefully. "He didn't mention the specifics." His eyes dropped to the medals on my chest. "That's a Silver Star. And a Bronze Star with Valor device. You've seen some action, son." "Yes, sir," I confirmed. "Several deployments to multiple theaters." The crowd was pressing closer now, a mixture of genuine interest and curiosity about the drama unfolding. My father still hadn't moved from the doorway, his face now set in the neutral expression he wore in court when he was unsure of his position. My mother materialized at my father's elbow, whispering urgently in his ear. I saw him shake his head slightly, but she persisted. Finally, he moved into the room, his courtroom composure sliding into place. "Alex," he said, his voice carefully modulated. "This is unexpected. Your mother didn't mention you were coming." "I wanted it to be a surprise," my mother interjected quickly. "For your birthday." "Alex came all the way from... Where are you stationed now, honey?" "That's classified, Mom," I said, not taking my eyes off my father. "But I arranged leave to be here." "Happy birthday, Dad." The silence stretched between us, weighted with 6 years of absence and unspoken words. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how this would play out. "Thank you," my father said finally, the words stiff and formal. "I appreciate you making the effort." Colonel Henderson, bless him, broke the tension. "Dick, you didn't tell me your son earned a Silver Star. That's extraordinary. What was the action, if you can discuss it?" I glanced at the colonel, grateful for the intervention but aware that answering would put my father in an even more uncomfortable position, acknowledging in front of his peers that he knew nothing about my achievements. "It was in Central Africa, sir," I said carefully. "Training and advisory mission that turned into a defense operation. We held position against a numerically superior force, protected civilian evacuees, and prevented what would have been a massacre." "Advisory mission," Henderson repeated thoughtfully. "Special Forces does a lot of that work. Building relationships, training indigenous forces. It's crucial work, though it rarely gets the recognition it deserves." He looked pointedly at my father. "You must be very proud." My father's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course," he said, the lie smooth as silk. Though Alex has always been modest about his accomplishments. He doesn't share much with the family. The subtle dig wasn't lost on me, implying that my silence was the problem, not his dismissal. But before I could respond, Marcus stepped forward, surprising me. "That's not entirely accurate, Dad," Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. "Alex tried to tell us about his service. I remember several conversations where he tried to explain what he was doing, and we didn't really listen." Victoria made a small sound of protest, but Sarah, Marcus's wife, spoke up. "Marcus is right. I remember the last dinner Alex came to before he deployed. It wasn't pleasant." She looked at me with something like apology in her eyes. "We weren't very supportive." The room had gone quiet again, but this was a different kind of silence, uncomfortable, charged with the recognition of old family wounds being exposed in public. My mother looked mortified, my father angry, and I felt a sudden surge of protectiveness for Marcus, who'd found the courage to speak truth in front of all these people. It's in the past, I said, trying to deflect. I didn't come here to rehash old arguments. I came because Mom invited me, and because 6 years is long enough to stay away. 6 years during which you could have visited, my father pointed out. Could have called, written, made any effort to stay connected to your family. The accusation stung precisely because it contained a kernel of truth. I had stayed away. I had chosen distance. But he was rewriting history, making it sound like I'd abandoned them rather than protecting myself from more criticism. You're right, I said, and saw surprise flicker across his face. I could have reached out. But the last time I was here, you called me useless in front of the entire family. You said I was wasting my potential, that I had nothing to show for my choices. I decided that maybe it was better for everyone if I just gave you space to not be disappointed in me. The room was so quiet I could hear the string quartet in the corner stop playing mid-note. My mother's hand was over her mouth again. Victoria looked down at her champagne glass. And my father's face had gone very still. I see, he said finally. So you've been nursing that grudge for 6 years, and now you come here in uniform, wearing all your medals like some kind of what? Statement? Proof that I was wrong. No, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm wearing my uniform, because this is who I am. These medals aren't a statement, they're a record. A record of missions completed, lives saved, a career built on service and sacrifice. I didn't come here to prove you wrong, Dad. I came here to close a chapter, to say goodbye to the version of myself that needed your approval to feel worthwhile. How noble, my father said with heavy sarcasm. The prodigal son returns, not seeking approval, but to deliver a lecture on his moral superiority. Richard, that's enough, Colonel Henderson interjected sharply. Your son has served with distinction in some of the most challenging conditions imaginable. He's earned decorations that most soldiers never come close to receiving. Whatever your disagreements about his career path, you should be able to acknowledge what he's accomplished. Stay out of this, Tom, my father snapped. This is a family matter. Then maybe we should discuss it as a family, privately, my mother suggested desperately, looking around at the room full of guests. Not here, in front of everyone. But I was done with private conversations where my father's voice dominated and my choices were dismissed. Done with biting my tongue to keep the peace. If he wanted to do this here, in front of all these people, then fine. What do you want me to say, Dad? I asked. Do you want me to apologize for not becoming a lawyer? For not following the path you laid out? I can't do that. I won't. Because the path I chose, the career I built, it matters. The people I've served with, the missions I've completed, the lives I've helped save, they matter. Maybe not to you, maybe not by your metrics of success, but they matter to the people who were there, who depended on me, who made it home because of decisions I made. You're asking me to celebrate you for playing soldier, my father said dismissively. For taking orders and following commands like some kind of... I give the orders, Dad. I interrupted, my voice harder now. I'm a sergeant first class in Special Forces. I lead teams. I train foreign militaries. I brief general officers on regional security situations. I don't follow blindly. I make strategic decisions that impact lives, operations, and international relationships. And yes, I've taken orders too, because that's how a functional hierarchy works. But unlike your law firm, when I make mistakes, people die. The stakes are a bit higher than losing a case or a client. The comparison was unfair and I knew it, but I'd been holding this back for too long. The frustration of years spent trying to make him understand, only to be dismissed repeatedly, came pouring out. My father's face had gone red. How dare you, he started, but I wasn't finished. I dare because I've earned the right, I said. I've spent 6 years becoming someone I'm proud to be. Someone my teammates trust with their lives. Someone who's made a difference in places you'll never see, doing things I can't discuss. And I've done it without your support, without your approval, without anything from you except criticism and disappointment. So yeah, I dare. Then why come back at all? My father demanded. If we're such a disappointment to you, if our approval means nothing, why are you here? It was a good question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly over the past 6 weeks. I looked around the room, at my mother's tearful face, at Marcus looking conflicted, at Victoria studying her glass, at the assembled family and friends watching this drama unfold like it was theater. And I realized that I did have an answer. Because I needed to see if anything had changed, I said quietly. I needed to know if maybe, after 6 years, you'd be able to see past your disappointment to recognize that I've built something worth respecting. I came back to give all of you, a chance to see who I've become. Not the failure you remember, but the person I am now. And, my father asked, his voice cold, have we passed your test? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what I'd always seen. A man so convinced of his own metrics for success that he couldn't recognize value that existed outside those narrow parameters. A man who would rather be right than be connected to his son. A man whose pride would never allow him to admit he'd been wrong about anything, much less about something as fundamental as his child's life choices. No, I said simply. You haven't. But that's okay, because I don't need you to. I needed to come here and say this, to close this loop properly, but I don't need your validation anymore. I have validation from people whose opinions I respect, people who've seen me at my best and worst, who know what I've sacrificed and what I've achieved. Your approval would have been nice, but it's not necessary. I turned to my mother, who was crying openly now. Mom, I'm sorry this didn't go differently. I hoped maybe it would be different this time, but some things don't change. I love you, and if you want to stay in touch, I'd like that. But I can't keep coming back to this. I gestured vaguely at the room, at my father, at the whole situation. I can't keep trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. I looked at Marcus. You were right to speak up earlier. Thank you for that. Then at Victoria, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. Take care of yourself, Vic. And finally, back to my father. Happy birthday, Dad. I hope it's everything you wanted. I turned to leave, and Colonel Henderson stepped forward. Sergeant Martinez, wait. He pulled out a business card. I'd like to talk with you if you have time. About your experiences, about transition planning if you ever decide to leave the service. I have connections with veterans organizations, security consulting firms, places that would value your expertise. Thank you, sir, I said, taking the card. It was a small kindness, but in that moment it meant everything. Acknowledgement from someone who understood what the uniform represented, what the medals meant. As I walked toward the door, I heard my father's voice behind me. Don't bother coming back next time. I stopped, turned back one last time. I wasn't planning to. The night air was cool as I left the house, and I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation hadn't gone well, but it had happened. I'd said what I needed to say, and more importantly, I'd realized something fundamental. I didn't need their acceptance. I'd come seeking closure, and I'd found it, not in reconciliation, but in recognition of an irreconcilable difference. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Marcus jogged up, slightly out of breath. Alex, wait. Please. I stopped, turning to face my brother. Marcus, you don't have to. Yeah, I do, he interrupted. I need to apologize. For that dinner 6 years ago, for not speaking up sooner, for letting Dad talk about you like that without saying anything. I was a coward and I'm sorry. The apology caught me off guard. Marcus and I had never been particularly close. 6 years age difference had meant we'd always been in different life stages, different friend groups. But there was genuine regret in his face. You spoke up tonight, I said. That took guts, especially in front of Dad's colleagues and friends. Yeah, well, it was past time, Marcus said. Sarah's been on my case for years about how we treated you. She was right. We were all so focused on Dad's expectations, on living up to his standards, that we never stopped to ask if those standards were the only ones that mattered. He looked back at the house, where the party was presumably trying to resume some semblance of normalcy. I'm proud of you, you know. What you've done. What you've accomplished. I looked you up after Mom told me you were coming, Googled military decorations, what they mean. A silver star is serious. Like, really serious. And you earned it doing something that mattered, saving people. That's more important than making junior partner, isn't it? There are different kinds of important. I said diplomatically. You help people navigate legal systems, protect their interests, solve problems. That matters too. Maybe, Marcus said. But I've never risked my life doing it. I've never had someone's survival depend on my decisions in the moment. And I've certainly never been decorated for valor. He smiled wryly. I'm really good at contracts and corporate litigation. But you're a hero. An actual hero. And Dad can't see it because it doesn't fit his definition of success. I'm not a hero, Marcus. I just did my job. That's what heroes always say, Marcus countered. He pulled out his phone. Can I have your number? Real contact info, not the old one that doesn't work anymore? Sarah would like to stay in touch, and honestly, so would I. I'd like to know my brother. The real you, not the version Dad created in his disappointment. We exchanged numbers, and Marcus pulled me into an unexpected hug. Thank you for coming back, he said. Even if it went to hell, thank you for trying. After Marcus went back inside, I sat in my rental car for a long moment, processing everything that had happened. The confrontation with my father had been painful, but necessary. The realization that I didn't need his approval had been liberating. And the unexpected reconciliation with Marcus had been healing, in a way I hadn't expected. My phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. How'd it go? I thought about how to answer. The evening had been dramatic, confrontational, and emotionally exhausting. It had ended with me walking out of my father's birthday party, possibly forever. By any conventional measure, it had been a disaster. But I didn't feel devastated. I felt free. Better than expected. I texted back. I'll tell you about it when I get back. But Rod, you were right. I didn't need their approval. I just needed to know that I don't need their approval. Proud of you, Sarge. See you Monday. I started the car and pulled out of the circular driveway, watching the family estate recede in my rearview mirror. Somewhere inside, my father was probably furious, my mother was probably trying to salvage the party, and guests were probably gossiping about the dramatic scene they'd witnessed. But I was driving away, uniforms still crisp, medals still gleaming, and head held high. I'd walked into that house as the disappointing son, the family failure, the one who'd made the wrong choices. I was leaving as exactly who I'd become, a decorated soldier, a respected leader, a man who'd earned his place through merit and sacrifice. The only opinion about my worth that mattered was my own. And for the first time in my life, I fully believed it. The military base felt more like home than the family estate ever had. As I drove through the gate 3 days later, showing my ID to the guard who waved me through with a casual salute, I felt the tension I'd been carrying since the birthday dinner finally release. Here, I knew who I was. Here, my value wasn't questioned or debated. It was demonstrated daily and recognized accordingly. Rodriguez was waiting outside my office when I arrived, leaning against the wall with his trademark grin. The prodigal sergeant returns. So? How bad was it? Bad enough that I probably won't be invited to Christmas, I said, unlocking the door. But also better than I expected in some ways. Over coffee, I filled him in on everything, the dramatic entrance, the standing ovation, the confrontation with my father, the unexpected support from Colonel Henderson, and reconciliation with Marcus. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from amused to thoughtful to supportive as the story unfolded. So, your old man basically doubled down on being a dick, he summarized when I finished. Can't say I'm surprised, but I am sorry. That had to hurt, even if you're past needing his approval. It did hurt, I admitted. But not as much as I expected. More like the ache of an old injury than a fresh wound. I think I'd already done most of the grieving for that relationship. This just made it official. And your brother? That's good, right? Yeah, I said, and realized I meant it. I didn't expect that. But it was good to know that someone in the family gets it, even if it took them 6 years to say so. The next few weeks fell back into familiar rhythm. Training cycles, briefings, administrative work, and planning for the next deployment. But something had shifted. I found myself lighter, more present, less burdened by the weight of unresolved family drama. The door I'd needed to close had been closed, and the space it left felt like room to breathe rather than an absence. Marcus called a few times, awkward at first but gradually finding a rhythm. He asked questions about my work, what I could discuss anyway, and actually listened to the answers. He told me about his cases, but also about his doubts, his struggles with living up to their father's expectations even after achieving what should have been enough success to satisfy anyone. "I made junior partner," he said during one call, and Dad's first response was to ask when I'd make senior partner. "It's never enough, you know? There's always another milestone, another achievement that will finally earn the approval that never quite comes." "So stop chasing it," I suggested. "Do the work because you value it, not because you're trying to prove something to him." "Like you did," Marcus said. "That's what you figured out, right? When to stop seeking approval and start living for yourself." Eventually, I acknowledged. "Took me longer than it should have. Cost me 6 years of relationship with you and Mom. But yeah, I figured it out." "Better late than never," Marcus said. "Sarah wants to know if we can visit sometime. See where you work, meet your team. Would that be okay?" The idea of Marcus and Sarah visiting, seeing this part of my life, felt surprisingly good. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that. Let me check the training schedule, and I'll send you some dates." My mother called too, tentatively at first. "I'm sorry about the party," she said during our first conversation. "Your father was upset. He felt ambushed." "I know, Mom, but I'm not sorry I came. I needed to do that, and I'm glad I did." "He's not going to change, Alex," she said quietly. "I know you hoped that maybe he would, but he won't. He's too proud, too convinced that his way is the right way." "I know," I said. "I'm okay with that now. I'm not asking him to change. I'm just asking that we acknowledge the reality of our relationship and stop pretending it's something it's not." "Can I still call you?" she asked, her voice small. "Even if your father and you aren't speaking? I don't want to lose you again." "Of course, Mom. I'd like that." The conversations with my mother became more regular, weekly check-ins where we talked about everyday things. She asked about my work, and I shared what I could. She told me about her garden, her book club, the small details of daily life that had nothing to do with my father's expectations. Slowly, we built something new. Not the relationship we'd had when I was young, but something more honest, with fewer evasions and unspoken tensions. Victoria never reached out. I wasn't surprised. We'd never been close, and she'd always been the most invested in maintaining our father's approval. A mutual friend told me she'd mentioned at a gallery opening that her brother was in the military, in the same tone one might say in prison, an embarrassing fact to be mentioned quickly and moved past. I let it go. Not everyone was capable of growth or reconciliation, and that was okay. 3 months after the birthday dinner, I was called into my commander's office. Colonel Williams was a career Special Forces officer, someone I respected enormously for both his tactical expertise and his leadership approach. "Close the door, Martinez," he said when I entered. "Have a seat." I sat, curious about the formal tone. Williams usually ran a casual office, preferring direct communication to military formality when we weren't in operational mode. "I've been reviewing your file," he said, pulling up something on his computer. "You're coming up on year 11 of service. Your contract ends next year, and you'll be eligible to re-enlist for another term. But I want to talk to you about your long-term plans." "I'm planning to re-enlist, sir," I said without hesitation. "I've got at least another decade in me, maybe more if my body holds up." "That's what I hoped you'd say," Williams said with a slight smile. "Because I've been asked to recommend candidates for a new advisory position. It's a staff position at the Pentagon, working with interagency task forces on counterinsurgency strategy and training program development. It would mean a promotion to Master Sergeant, possibly Sergeant Major if you perform well. 2-year rotation, then back to operational units with significantly enhanced career prospects." I stared at him, processing the information. A Pentagon position, working on strategic-level policy and program development. It was the kind of assignment that could define a career, opening doors to senior enlisted leadership positions and post-military opportunities that most soldiers never saw. "Why me, sir?" I asked finally. Because you have operational experience across multiple theaters, language skills, cultural competency, and a proven track record of building effective training programs. You've seen what works and what doesn't at the ground level, and you can articulate those insights in ways that strategic planners need to hear. Plus, you've got a bachelor's degree and are working on a master's. The position requires someone who can operate in both worlds, tactical and strategic, military and civilian, operational and academic. It was an incredible opportunity, one I'd never imagined being offered. But it also meant leaving my team, leaving the operational work I loved, spending 2 years in meetings and policy development instead of in the field. "Can I think about it, sir?" I asked. "Of course. I need an answer in 2 weeks. But Martinez? Don't underestimate the importance of this kind of work. Direct action gets the headlines, but the strategic planning and program development is what creates lasting change. You've got the skills and experience to make a real difference at that level. Consider it seriously." I did consider it seriously. I talked to Rodriguez, who told me I'd be an idiot to turn it down. I talked to Thompson, who said he'd miss me but that I needed to think about the long game. I talked to Chin, who pointed out that operational soldiers had a shelf life, but good strategic leaders could influence the military for decades. And I talked to Marcus, surprisingly. We'd started having regular conversations, and I valued his perspective as someone outside the military bubble. "It sounds like a big deal," he said when I explained the opportunity. "Career-defining type of position. Are you hesitant because you don't want it, or because it feels too much like success, and that makes you uncomfortable?" The question cut right to something I'd been dancing around. "Maybe a bit of both," I admitted. "I love operational work. I love leading teams in the field. This would be completely different: meetings, briefings, policy documents. It's important work, but it's not what I signed up for." "You signed up to serve," Marcus countered. "To make a difference. This is another way to do that, just at a different level. And, honestly, it sounds like exactly the kind of challenge you're ready for. You've proven yourself operationally. Maybe it's time to prove you can excel at the strategic level too." In the end, I accepted the position. Colonel Williams was right. The work mattered, and I had insights and experience that could benefit the broader military if I was willing to step away from direct action and into strategic planning. It was time to evolve, to grow into new challenges, to see what I was capable of beyond the operational sphere. The news spread quickly through the team. Rodriguez organized a send-off party at the local bar we frequented, and half the company showed up. There were speeches, some serious, most ridiculous, and more than a few toasts to the fancy Pentagon sergeant who was leaving them for air-conditioned offices and PowerPoint briefings. "You're going to hate it for about a month," Rodriguez told me, slightly drunk and emotional. "You're going to miss the field, miss the team, miss actually doing things instead of planning things. But then you're going to find your rhythm, and you're going to be brilliant at it, because that's who you are. You adapt, you excel, and you make a difference wherever you are." "I'm going to miss you guys," I said, and meant it deeply. These people had become my real family, the ones who knew me, trusted me, and valued me for exactly who I was. "We'll still be here when you're done playing politics," Thompson said. 2 years goes faster than you think. Plus, you'll have to come back eventually. Can't make sergeant major from behind a desk forever." The transition to the Pentagon was jarring. Instead of early morning PT with my team, I had early morning meetings with colonels and civilian analysts. Instead of tactical planning for operations, I reviewed program assessments and budget proposals. Instead of leading soldiers in the field, I was trying to influence policy that would affect thousands of soldiers I'd never meet. It was frustrating at first, just as Rodriguez had predicted. I chafed at the bureaucracy, at the layers of approval required for simple decisions, at the disconnect between strategic planning and ground reality. But gradually, I found my footing. I learned to translate operational experience into policy recommendations, to navigate interagency politics, to build coalitions around programs I believed would make a difference. And I was promoted to Master Sergeant after my first year, recognition of both my performance in the position and my potential for continued advancement. The promotion came with new responsibilities, leading a team of analysts, briefing senior leaders, representing the enlisted perspective in high-level planning sessions. One afternoon, about 18 months into my Pentagon rotation, I was preparing a briefing on training program effectiveness when my desk phone rang with an outside number. Master Sergeant Martinez, I answered. Alex? It's Colonel Henderson. Tom Henderson. We met at your father's birthday party. I remembered him immediately. My father's law partner, the veteran who'd stood first when I entered. Colonel Henderson, yes, sir. What can I do for you? I'm calling because I have a proposition for you, he said. I've been following your career. Marcus has kept me updated, and I understand you're at the Pentagon now, working on strategic programs. When your rotation ends, whenever you're ready to transition out of active service, I want you to consider joining a consulting firm I'm affiliated with. We do security consulting, risk assessment, and training program development for corporate and government clients. Your experience would be invaluable, and frankly, we need people who actually understand what they're talking about instead of former officers coasting on their rank. It was an unexpected offer, and not one I was ready to consider seriously. I still had years left in my military career. But it was also validating recognition from outside the military that my experience and expertise had value in the civilian world. I appreciate the offer, sir, I said. I'm not planning to leave the service anytime soon, but I'd be interested in staying in touch. Good man, Henderson said. And Alex? I owe you an apology. I've known your father for 20 years, and I should have said something that night when he dismissed your service. I should have stood up for you earlier, not just when you walked in wearing your medals. I'm sorry for that. The apology was unexpected and touching. You stood when it mattered, sir. That meant a lot. Your father's a brilliant attorney, Henderson said carefully, but he's wrong about you. Dead wrong. I hope someday he realizes that, but in case he doesn't, I wanted you to know that others see your value clearly. After we hung up, I sat at my desk thinking about how far I'd come from that dinner 6 years ago. The useless son had become a master sergeant working at the Pentagon, briefing generals, shaping programs that would impact the entire military. I had job offers from prestigious consulting firms, respect from people whose opinions actually mattered, and a clear path toward the highest ranks of enlisted leadership. More importantly, I had peace. I'd stopped waiting for my father's approval, stopped measuring myself against his expectations. I'd built a life and career that had meaning and purpose on my own terms, surrounded by people who valued what I brought to the table. Marcus called that evening. Hey, just wanted to check in. How's Washington treating you? Good, I said. Really good, actually. Got an interesting call today from your dad's law partner. Colonel Henderson? Yeah, he asks about you sometimes. I think he feels bad about the party. He offered me a job. Well, a job for when I eventually retire from the military. That's fantastic, Marcus said. Though I hope you're not planning to retire anytime soon. You've got at least another decade in you, right? That's the plan, I confirmed. Make sergeant major, maybe command sergeant major, if I'm really lucky. Then transition to something civilian side, teaching or consulting, or something where I can still make a difference. You're going to make sergeant major, Marcus said with certainty. Hell, you'll probably make command sergeant major. You're exactly the kind of leader the military needs at senior levels, someone who actually remembers what it's like in the field, who cares about the people below them, who makes decisions based on effectiveness rather than career advancement. We talked for another hour about everything and nothing, his work, my work, his kids. I was now Uncle Alex to 2 nephews I saw via video chat, plans for a visit during my next leave. The relationship we'd built over the past year and a half was real, based on genuine connection rather than obligation. It was one of the unexpected gifts that had come from that disastrous birthday party. My mother called weekly, our conversations warm and easy in a way they'd never been before. She'd started volunteering at a veterans support organization, partly because of me, but also because she'd discovered a genuine passion for the work. I wish I'd understood better what you were doing, she told me once. I wish I'd asked more questions, taken more interest. I'm proud of you, Alex. I always was, even when I didn't show it well. My father and I never spoke. According to Marcus, he'd maintained his position that I'd made the wrong choices, wasted my potential. He told people his youngest son was in the military in the same dismissive tone Victoria used, as if my service was an embarrassment rather than a source of pride. It bothered me less than I expected. I'd made peace with the reality that some people, even people you're related to, will never understand or value what you've built. Their incomprehension said more about their limitations than about my achievements. 2 years after that birthday party, I was standing in the Pentagon briefing room, presenting training program recommendations to a room full of colonels, generals, and senior civilian officials. I'd prepared thoroughly, using data from multiple deployments and theaters to support my recommendations. The briefing went well, pointed questions but thoughtful engagement, several nodding heads, indications that my suggestions would be seriously considered. As the meeting concluded, a 3-star general approached me. Master Sergeant Martinez, excellent brief. Your operational experience really comes through in the recommendations. How much longer do you have on your Pentagon rotation? 6 months, sir, I answered. Have you thought about your next assignment? I'm hoping to get back to an operational unit, sir. Maybe group level, coordinating training across multiple battalions. The general nodded approvingly. Good instinct. You need to stay connected to operational realities if you're going to continue influencing policy. But keep in mind, soldiers with your combination of operational experience and strategic thinking are rare. You've got a bright future ahead of you. Sergeant Major is within reach if you want it.
Thank you, sir.
I'd be honored. As I walked back to my office, I thought about that path, the years ahead, the potential to reach the highest levels of enlisted leadership, the opportunity to shape the military from the inside while staying true to the values that had brought me to service in the first place. I thought about the dinner table 6 years ago, my father's voice declaring me useless, and how certain he'd been of my failure. I thought about walking into that birthday party in my dress uniform, watching people stand, seeing the recognition in their eyes of what I'd accomplished. But mostly, I thought about the journey itself, the deployments, the challenges, the friendships forged under fire, the leaders who'd mentored me, the soldiers I'd led, the missions we'd completed together. The medals on my chest represented moments of valor, but they were just symbols. The real achievement was the person I'd become, someone who led with integrity, who valued service over self-interest, who measured success by impact rather than status. My phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. Heard you killed it in the briefing. Told you you'd be good at this. Still coming to Thompson's promotion ceremony next month? We're having a party after. Wouldn't miss it, I texted back, smiling. That evening, I sat in my small Washington apartment, reviewing the next day's briefing materials. On my wall hung a photo from my Special Forces graduation, my team, covered in mud, exhausted, triumphant. Next to it, a photo from Rodriguez's daughter's baptism, where I'd been named godfather. And a recent addition, a picture Marcus had sent of his family, with a note on the back, "Proud to be your brother." My father's voice still echoed occasionally in the quiet moments, the word useless sometimes surfacing when I doubted myself. But it had lost its power. It was just noise now, easily drowned out by the voices that mattered. Teammates who trusted me, leaders who valued me, friends who knew me, a brother who'd chosen to see me clearly. I'd walked into that birthday party seeking closure, and I'd found it. Not in reconciliation or my father's belated approval, but in the recognition that I no longer needed either. I'd built a life worth living, a career worth having, surrounded by people worth knowing. I'd proven, to the only person whose opinion ultimately mattered, that I was anything but useless. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.